Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. Now, this afternoon, let's look at the whole matter of Jamaica versus Venezuela. We understand that the warships are in the Southern Caribbean Sea, and you might be able to inform me, but I haven't heard any principled foreign policy statement coming out of Jamaica. And this is a very troubling and concerning situation. Jamaica versus US warships. What's really happening in the Caribbean? That is the title of our discourse today. Now, we understand that Jamaica recently had its general election and their attention was consumed with the events that took place there and the election of the next Prime Minister of Jamaica. And we saw the GLP emerging as the winner of that general election that was held there on September 3rd. Now, subsequent to that event, I would have thought that the Prime Minister of Jamaica would have declared his stance on the position of what is happening, the diplomatic role between Venezuela and the United States, which is having grave consequences on Caribbean relations. Now, yesterday I was reading an article in which, the writer suggested, I think it was from the Trinidad Guardian, that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Person de Caesar, that she was going to be going to the United Nations, general conference on whatever she was going to pronounce her discourse on. But the fact of the matter is that the writer was concerned that Kamala Person de Caesar was not present at the last CARICOM meeting held in Montego Bay, Jamaica. And the fact that she's so much enthusiastic about, paying attention to US foreign policy in Venezuela. Well, we must understand that she is suggesting that the high crime and violence rates that we see, in Trinidad and Tobago is due to drug traffickers from Venezuela. They have contributed a lot to the violence, according to her, that we see in Trinidad and Tobago. But is that true? What are the facts suggesting? We understand that most of the drugs, the cocaine that are, sent to the United States, exported to the United States, come out of Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, among other countries, and that the transshipment point really is through the Pacific and not through Venezuela. Now, Venezuela, I'm sure there are some ripple effects there. But Venezuela is not the center of drug trafficking in Latin America as the United States is purporting. And neither in South America is it. So why is the United States, therefore, so belligerent and so determined to go after Venezuela? Well, we know that this has been a long game that the United States has been playing for decades, since 2002, thereabout, I should say, when Hugo Chavez, they tried to have deposed the government of Hugo Chavez. So the United States has had a long history in seeking to depose the socialist agenda, the Bolivarian agenda of Nicolas Maduro and his predecessor. Now, we must understand that the United States is seeking full spectrum dominance, and it doesn't want anyone within the region and the world at large to go against its economic, social, political, and military ideology. It wants to be the sole superpower in the world. And we know that Nicolas Maduro is not towing the line with Washington in terms of her economic, military agenda for the world. Now, there are individuals who are suggesting, there are allegations that Venezuela is also or is about to become a part of the BRICS nation, and that they're siding with Iran, with Russia, with China, and the likes of that. That could be one of the reasons. I do know that the United States does not wants to enforce the Monroe Doctrine 2.0 in the Caribbean. and Latin America to suggest to any other world power, including China, Russia, and any other global power that might be in the region, that she is the dominant ruler and she does not want any competitor in the world to be here in this region. Now, during the war on terror, because the United States was held up in Iraq and other nations, they were not able to hold down and to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. But now the United States is suggesting that she is going to pay attention to domestic terrorists at home, to domestic violence, to the empire at home. And there was an article, I think, was in Political that suggested that the United States is going to shift its attention from the international diplomacy to domestic diplomacy. And by domestic, she doesn't only mean on US shores, but she means within the region, because the United States considers the Caribbean and Latin America as her backyard, right? Now, she is now about to step up on her plans for gunboat diplomacy, right? The gunboat diplomacy. And that is what it is. And that means diplomacy by force, diplomacy through military operations. That is what she is about at this point of her imperial undertakings. The United States of America wants to control the world. And it means, therefore, to control the world, it means, therefore, that you have to do what she says that you ought to do. And this is what we're finding, that Venezuela is not towing the line. Iran doesn't want to toe the line. Iraq also, and all the major countries that she has gone into, and she has deposed presidents and prime ministers, it is because they were not towing the line. And then she creates a narrative surrounding them that they're terrorists. So she linked the regime of Saddam Hussein, that he was the one who carried out the events of 9/11, even though the CIA had told the United States that, Saddam Hussein was not involved, and that he had also no weapons of mass destruction, as the US had purported. But the United States would not listen, even to its own intelligence agency. It says that, yes, fly high or fly low, we are going to depose the regime of what's his name? Not Nicolas Maduro, of Saddam Hussein. And we saw the consequences of the deposition of this former president of Iraq and the chaos that it unleashed in the Middle East, and which spilled over into Europe and other surrounding areas in the region, in terms of the terrorist networks, because there are, in fact, some very brutal people in that hemisphere. But the fact is that the Iraqi president, Saddam Hussein, had them under manners and under control. And when the United States opened up now that can of worms, they were able to go across and go global. And some people are of the assumption that some of these people are, in fact, created by the US, right? So we know that the drug trafficking network is not controlled by Venezuela. That is a fact. It is not controlled by Venezuela. If Venezuelans are involved, just like Jamaicans or Trinidadians or any, they are just the middle to the lower men and women who might be involved, but they are not the movers and the shakers of this industry. So even if the United States should go to depose the government of Nicolas Maduro tomorrow, it's not going to solve the problem of violence. It's not going to solve the drug crisis and the drug trafficking crisis that we find ourselves and we find in the world. Remember now that the United States is the greatest consumer of the drugs of which she speaks. If the demand is therefore reduced significantly, then we won't have this trafficking. We won't have the supply. But if Venezuela is not the center of drug trafficking in the region, which she is not, neither is she the focal traffic point, then why is the United States so determined to depose the government of Nicolas Maduro? And these are some of the questions that Jamaica has to ask. And we're not engaged in this dialogue, because we're so much consumed by the childish political commentaries that I see coming out of Jamaica. So the school bus and everything. But what is going to happen to us is going to have grave consequences if the government of Nicolas Maduro is deposed by force. Because what the message that Washington will be sending to the region and the world at large is that she gets what she wants. And if she doesn't get what she wants, she's going to use her military and use propaganda, media propaganda, to depose prime ministers and presidents. And this is not something that you want to have in the democratic realm, right? That is not what diplomacy and freedom and civic, what should I say now? Civic engagement is all about. It's not that. And we have to really come to grips with that reality. Now, there was an article here in the livemint.com, and it says U.S. strike on drug boat, Venezuela's anger versus Trinidad's praise. So the Trinidadian president was praising the attack on the boat that was in the Caribbean region, okay, in the Caribbean waters. Now, in Caracas, President Nicolas Maduro denounced the strike as part of Washington's alleged attempt to seize Venezuela's vast oil and gas resources. And many people are suggesting that that is so, but the US not only wants the oil and gas, but wants all of the resources in Venezuela and by extension in the Caribbean and Latin America. But in doing that, she has to use a pretext because there's no other way to get the president, the current president of Venezuela, out of office, but to say that he is involved with drug trafficking. Now, in contrast, Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar praised the U.S. strike, calling it a blow against the cartels that have fueled violence in her country. I, along with most of the country, am happy that the United States naval deployment is having success in their mission. The pain and suffering the cartels have indicted, or inflicted, I should say, on our nation is immense. I have no sympathy for traffickers. The U.S. military should kill them all violently. That is what she's saying. Now listen to what the Prime Minister is saying. The U.S. military should kill them all violently, she said in a statement. Now, how can a Prime Minister make such a statement? Shouldn't we have due process? The fact that the United States sees a boat and she is alleging, she is suspecting that that might be drug traffickers, shouldn't they have been stopped and then tried in a court of law to see if they were in fact drug traffickers? Why kill people that you suspect that they might be? All right? Is that the way we want our free world, the manner in which we want our free world to operate? These are the questions that Jamaica should be asking, the principled and taking a principled stance against what we see happening in the Caribbean waters. But there is a dearth and there is a deficit of Caribbean leaders. We have them and they're just there, occupying space, right? They're just occupying space, but they do not have the mettle of a man or a woman to stand up to do that which is right, that which is ethical, that which is moral, that which is principled. And this is what we want to hear coming out of Jamaica, but we're not hearing anything. There is a deafening silence that is worrisome, that is concerning, and that will result in Jamaica paying a very high cost for. We have to stand for that which is right, though the heavens fall. Very important that we understand that. Okay? Now, so I was very, very much perturbed at Kamala Persad-Bissessar's statement. Now, while Washington insists the strike targeted Tren de Aragua, which it has designated a terrorist organization, questions remain over the evidence linking the 11 killed directly to the gang or to Venezuelan President Maduro, whom Trump claims controls the group, a claim contradicted by U.S. intelligence assessments. with Venezuela mobilizing troops along its coast and allies in the Caribbean divided, the strike risks furthering straining U.S.-Venezuela relations while reshaping regional security dynamics, which is what it is going to do. This has nothing to do with security, right? It has to do with control, control politically, militarily, economically, and with now the discovery of oil in the region, or their decision now to extract oil from the region, from Guyana and possibly from Jamaica. Who knows? We are hearing conflicting reports about oil being in Jamaica, but our leaders have not yet confirmed that. And I see a lot of propaganda information going up, YouTube information from Jamaica saying that, oh, Jamaica is going to produce oil for Trinidad, and all of this nonsense going up and receiving hundreds of thousands of views, and they just don't know what they're talking about. But ignorance is bliss in Jamaica, and we thrive on ignorance rather than looking at things that are of substance. And this is one of the key issues that we should be talking about. And we're not talking about, we prefer to talk about who won the election, who stole, and that might be important too. But right now, we are faced with this very serious geopolitical undertaking. And if we do not take a principled stance, we are sure to suffer the consequences in the future. So my question to Dr. Michael Andrew Holness, what is your stance, sir? What is your stance? And I would like to hear also from the opposition leader, Mark Jefferson Goldie. What is your stance? Apart from just telling us now that there were some election irregularities, I want to hear your principled stance, Mark Golding. If you had won the election, what would you have done? What would have been your pronouncements? These are some of the things I would like you to say, and I would like to hear coming out of Kingston, Jamaica. Is that too much? Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos, so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Thank you for joining another time. Ciao.